What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, the man.
I'm a man, finally. Hey, what's up? It's your boy, Modd.
Who has seen the dark side of the moon. Modd.
When did that happen?
I read it on the internet. So I got you involved in this podcast. The only man that's ever seen the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
Modd. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm really good, man. I'm feeling a lot better since the last time we met.
Good.
And my wife's been on vacation, so I've been chilling with the fam big time.
Nice.
Had a lot of, so that's evident on the socials. Got a lot of pictures with me and the kid and the wife.
Nice.
And yeah, no complaints.
Good. Me neither, man. Me neither.
Good.
I'm doing really good, too. I had a nice day yesterday, nice bike ride, went down to Holland, got some lunch.
Nice.
It was cool just to relax and chill with the wife, like no expectations for once a weekend with now a bunch of stuff planned. You know, It seems to have been this whole summer, every weekend or something. So yesterday we just kind of did our own thing. No big hurry, you know. That's always good to have those days where you're not in a big hurry, you know.
Yeah.
So.
It's always refreshing and recharging to get the family time in. No plans, just whatever you feel like doing.
Yep, for sure. So, well, I'm glad that you're doing good, and I hope you guys are all doing good out there in Metal Maniacs land or whatever you want to call it. But today we have a bio episode. This one's been long overdue. I pushed it back a couple weeks, but there was a lot to this one. These bio episodes are kind of a pain because you want to make sure that as many facts as that you have are correct. You want to make sure that the information's there and it's in your voice because there's so much information out there, especially with the band that we're going to cover, and the band is Sepultura.
Ooh. All
so
right. Yeah, these guys go back a long ways, especially with us. Again, another one of those bands that kind of was there in the beginning of all of it. When we talk about extreme metal, I think this is a band name that we haven't mentioned enough on the show. Especially with respect to being there at the beginning. And that's kind of unfortunate, but we do love this band. Listened to them plenty over the years, and today we're going to really get into the catalog and dissect them. And I know, Jay, you put a lot of work into this one and wanted to make sure you got it right.
Yeah.
So whenever you want to kick this thing off, man, I'm ready.
I will say I do want to start with a little caveat before we go into this. So when we did the Morbid Angel episode, we did have a comment that we had kind of mentioned in a roundabout way where we may have not dove into the actual music catalog as much as we probably should have on some of the middle albums after Domination. Yeah. And I thought it was only right, the reason why I push it back, because I wanted to make sure I listened to almost every note of every Sepultura. That's almost next to impossible because there's fucking so much out there.
Yeah.
There's also one album that I'll just say right now that I didn't even listen to because they did one during quarantine, and it was like a bunch of their songs with a bunch of other members of different bands or whatever. I didn't really need to hear those versions of them, but they put out a whole album of like covers of their own band with other members of, you know, like when they're doing all them quarantine things.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like Metal Injection did a bunch of them or whatever, but they put a whole album out, but I didn't listen to that because.
But it was material that you've already heard before.
Exactly. It was all Sepultura songs, you know, Rise and, you know.
Like rewritten or remixed or redone. Yeah, I got you. That's fair. I mean, we're not going to hold that against you, but so they've got a long catalog, right? What do they go back to, 83, 84?
84 they start. So
man, I didn't realize how much they had before what I thought was the beginning. I thought the beginning was like maybe Schizophrenia, but I think they did a couple of things.
Yeah, and we'll get into that.
But yeah, so I did a little investigating. I'm going to leave a lot of it to you, and I'm just going to supply some color commentary along the way.
No, that's cool. That's totally cool. So,
but I've been a huge fan, so tell me more, Jay.
All right, cool. So Sepultura, which means grave in Portuguese, is a heavy metal band from Brazil that got started in 1984 in Belo Horizonte by brothers Max and Igor Cavalera. They exploded with their brand of groove metal, thrash metal, and death metal in the late 80s and early 90s. As they evolved, they experimented with sounds from alternative metal, world music, new metal, hardcore punk, and industrial metal. People also recognize Sepultura as one of the key bands in the second wave of thrash metal acts from the late 80s to early 90s.
Yeah.
So we'll get into this a little deeper, but man, they started off as thrashaholics, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So over their 40-year journey, the band has seen a lot of changes in its lineup. Max left in 1996 and Igor followed in 2006. The current members are singer Derek Green, who took over for Max in 1997, guitarist Andreas Kisser, bassist Paulo Jr., and drummer Grayson Necrotman, who joined in 2024 after Elo Casagrande left. Since Igor's departure in 2006, there haven't been any original members in the band. Paulo Jr. has been with the band the longest, having joined shortly after it was formed in late 1984, but he didn't play on any studio albums until Chaos AD in 1993. Andreas Kisser, who stepped in for early guitarist Jairo Guedz, has been on every album since their second effort, Schizophrenia, which came out in 1987, and also played bass until Chaos AD. In March 2024, after 4 decades of making music together, Sepultura started a farewell tour that's set to last a year and a half, after which they plan to disband. They've released 15 studio albums so far, with their latest being Quadra in 2020. The band has sold over 3 million units in the U.S. and nearly 20 million worldwide. They've earned multiple gold and platinum records in countries like France, Australia, Indonesia, the U.S., Cyprus, and of course their home country, Brazil. So, with that being said, I'll give you my little introduction to Sepultura. I almost want to say, so back in the day when I first started getting into Slayer and all that, I kind of heard a Rise in the background.
Sure.
Like the homies were playing it, the Broadway homies, they were playing it here and there. It was just kind of faded in. But I don't think until I did the whole BMG thing, which we talked about, getting Chaos AD. And I don't know if you showed me that first, or I just ordered it myself because I'm like, Sepultura, Slayer, you're just getting into all the bands, so you're trying to get everything. So Chaos AD was kind of really where I came on. Like I said, Arise was getting played by the homies, but it was nothing that I was like, I got to go get that Arise CD or really listen to a lot. But I grabbed that Chaos AD, and that's where I was like, okay, yeah, I really like Sepultura. And I know we jammed that one a lot.
Yeah, I think we were listening to Chaos AD quite a bit, and right about that same time is like when Roots dropped. I don't know, like the infamous story between the two of us is that I had owned Arise at some point, and you had owned Chaos AD, and I wasn't spitting Arise, like I wasn't appreciating it enough, and I was like, well, I know that there are tracks on Chaos AD that I want to listen to. Like I know there's Territory, the title track. I forget some of the other titles off rip, but I was like, well, let me just swap that out with Jay, see what he says, and you obliged. You're like, okay, there's a sucker born every minute. I'll take Arise off your hands for you. Probably going down as the second worst trade in history, only after I gave you Disincarnate for his fix.
Yeah.
That was terrible, too.
That was a rough trade.
Yeah, for me, I definitely, I mean, that album that I got was okay. I like that dude's vocals, but, yeah, giving you Arise for Chaos AD, both great albums, but I had to go back and buy Arise years later because fucking great album, so... Yeah, I think same, like, obviously we're the same age, and we kind of, like, listen to the same stuff at the same time, but, yeah, the KSAD Arise swap is going down in the books.
That, the early Slayer stuff and the early Sepultura stuff, even, I fell in love with the early Metallica stuff because when I started getting into playing guitar, I just went through their whole catalog, and their stuff's a little more accessible than, like, earlier Slayer, and a lot of that thrash stuff has kind of passed me by, and I'll get into a little bit more of that. But so Sepultura came to life in 1984 in Belo Horizonte, the capital of Minas Gerais, Brazil. The band was founded by brothers Márcio Malanio Antonio Max Cavalera, born August 4th, 1969, and Igor Graziana Cavalera on September 4th, 1970. They were the sons of Vaniana, a Brazilian model, and Graciolano, a wealthy Italian diplomat. Graciolano, who was known to be in good health, passed away at age 41 from an unexpected heart attack. Graciolano, being the main breadwinner, seen the family shortly after falling into financial hardship. These events had a profound impact on Max, who was 9, and Igor, that must have put him at like 8 because he was just a little younger than him. They moved in with their mother and sister into their grandmother's house and had to find work to help out at a young age. They had an overwhelming situation, and it led to behavior challenges for both of the young men. Max and Igor discovered their dad's record collection, which consisted of bands like Motorhead and Black Sabbath. They had disdain for the world, so finding heavy metal only helped with this.
Mm-hmm.
So I know
that's like old school gent thal right there.
Yeah.
Like you got thrash on the one hand and doom on the other.
Yeah.
So pretty good influences.
You know, as you're growing and in this time period, you're 9 or 10, but as you're starting to age, you're starting into this preteen, teen angst thing going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You find metal. And you're like, oh, this helps me get all this aggression out because I'm stuck with my grandma and my mother and my sister in this small, back of the small house.
Yep.
And what happened to my dad? He was only 41. I didn't get to enjoy his life. So
Right.
you could understand that these guys, and being, where they're from in Brazil, the story goes, they were kind of well off
Mm-hmm.
with their dad around.
Yeah.
And then, it kind of really hit them hard because they were just... They
Yep.
didn't have shit to show for it, after a while. So
Left without dad and left without the security of his financial support. So
exactly.
That's pretty rough.
So inspired by hearing Black Sabbath's 1972 album Volume 4, Max wanted to form a band, and they named it Sepultura, which means grave in Portuguese, after translating the Motorhead song Dancing on Your Grave. The brothers were initially influenced by bands like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple, as well as heavy metal and hard rock acts from the late 70s and early 80s, such as Van Halen, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, AC/DC, Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, and V8. Not really familiar with V8, but that kind of seems the way it goes with, that's just everybody's start, right? Iron Maiden, Motorhead, all the bands that were getting it in the early 70s, or, late 70s and early 80s. You know?
I only drink V8 if I feel a cold coming on.
Never heard of the band, so...
Same, never.
They also enjoyed hardcore punk bands like Teveret Kadat, Ratuus, and Discharge. They used to travel to a record shop in Sao Paulo to get tapes and latest records by American bands. Their musical taste shifted dramatically after discovering Venom. Igor recalled, quote, "The first time I listened to Venom, it was on a friend's tape. It was like Motorhead, but heavier. Someone called it the Devil's Motorhead. After that, we stopped listening to Iron Maiden and the lighter stuff."
The lighter stuff.
Love it, dude. I fucking love it. The Cavalera brothers started getting into more extreme bands such as Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, Creator, Sodom, Slayer, Megadeth, Exodus, and Exciter. They were also influenced by Brazilian metal bands like Stress, Sagrado Inferno, and Dorso Atlantica. By 1984, they had dropped out of school. After several lineup changes, Sepultura settled with Max Antichrist on guitar, Eagle Skullcrusher on drums, and lead vocalist Wagner Lamarnier and bassist Paulo Jr. The band's early aesthetic was lathered in corpse paint. So, as you can see, we've told this story many times on this show. It's the story of the metalhead. You start getting into some little hard rock, you get into some Led Zeppelin. Oh, what's this? Iron Maiden got a little double bass kicking in here once in a while, a little gallop.
Little trot.
And then all of a sudden you're like, well, fucking Celtic Frost and Hellhammer, like, yeah, this is evil shit. So,
I think it starts out with stuff that sounds cool. Like, yeah, that's rock. I dig it. And then as you're digging deeper for the next thing, that next dopamine hit, as it were, back in the day, you start to find that you get into stuff with more attitude, more imagery, more storytelling, deeper, darker storytelling, like depending on how far that individual wants to go. Some people kind of draw the line at, nah, I'm good at Led Zeppelin. No further, please.
Yeah.
Like Soundgarden for me, thanks. Like I'm good. But some of us just keep pushing the envelope. I need it darker. I need it heavier. And Jay, you and I love some of the darkest music on the planet. But even still, you and I will kind of run into a wall where like, nope, that's at least me. I kind of like, I'll hit something. I'll be like, that's beyond the pale for me.
Oh,
even.
yeah.
But like, but it's out there.
It's out there.
There's always something heavier. But yeah, it almost becomes cliche at this point. Nobody really starts out with black metal.
Right.
Hardly.
Right.
Maybe kids these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually start
not a lot of black metal on TikTok, so probably not. But
not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Wait till they get a load of us.
Yeah. So Lamarnier left March 1985, and after some disagreements, and later led the Brazilian black metal band Sarcófago. I finally said that correctly on this show. Thanks. Just in case you're keeping track on your bingo cards. Max then took over vocal duties, and Jairo Guedz joined as the lead guitarist. So I read a little bit, and I didn't go too deep into the history of Sepultura versus Sarcophago, but apparently they were like arch rivals or arch nemesis. But I encourage you guys to go look into that a little bit more. To me, it probably just was a thing where, and I'm just making an assumption. This is just one of those things where it's like, you're young. There's not enough for everybody around here, so fuck that band because he left our band.
Yeah.
No, fuck your band because my band's better.
Yeah.
It's just probably one of those kind of things, you know?
Sure.
But that Sarcophago, we brought them up a bunch of times on the show.
Okay.
Influence, like big time in the black metal episodes, but like influencing a lot of other bands as well. So that band did come on, went to become something.
Yeah.
But they just never became Sepultura, you know?
Yeah.
So in the early days, Max didn't even know how to tune his guitar and had to have members from other bands do it for him. After about a year of performing, Cogumelo Records representatives happened to be at a show and appreciated the boy's style and aggression. Max Cavalera is also renowned for his playing his 6-string guitar with only 4 strings, specifically omitting the B and high E. So second and first strings.
Yeah, just rhythm only, please.
The unique style emerged after he broke both strings one day and decided not to replace them. A friend later remarked that the guitar looked better without those strings, and it soon became Cavalera's trademark. Initially, he even played with just 3 strings, but eventually added a 4th to accommodate a Sepultura song written by Kisser that required an additional string. So I guess just out of necessity, he added that. I just wanted to add that in there because as I was winding this down, I almost forgot about that. Also, one of our Dexter used to do that too.
Just the 4 strings?
Yeah, just the 4 strings. I don't think he does it anymore, but
Probably
he used
not.
to do that.
Yeah.
He was a big Max fan though too. So Sepultura signed with Cogumelo Records in 1985. That same year, they released Bestial Devastation, a split EP with Brazilian band Overdose. The boys were only around 15 at that time. The songs from this EP were later included as bonus tracks on the CD version of Morbid Visions. Max and Igor re-recorded the EP and Morbid Visions under their new band, Cavalera Conspiracy, in 2023. I have a little asterisk here. We'll actually circle back around to this when we come to the end because I have a few things to say about that too. So, because they were short on cash, most of the instruments used on Bestial Devastation were borrowed. A friend of the band did vocals on the intro track, The Curse, because he could make a unique burping song, Igor said. Quote, "We had a friend do the voice for the intro because he could do that without effects. It was funny, so we had him do it in the studio."
Nice.
The band had some disagreements with the producer during the recording. Igor mentioned, quote, "He wanted to clean everything up in the mix, so we played him some Venom records to show how we wanted it to sound. Months before recording Bestial Devastation, the band decided to switch their lyrics from Portuguese to English. None of them knew English well, so they asked a friend Lino to translate their lyrics. One of Lino's rough translations appear in the song Antichrist, saying, 'Churches will be destroyed, crosses will be broken. He's laughing in blasphemy like a domination of death.'"
Yeah, definitely written by 15-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if that that change from Portuguese to English was what separated them from Sarcophago. That tends to be a thing for bands foreign to adopt English for accessibility, and not just in America. I think worldwide, I think English is, I don't know why, but it's the go-to language for a lot of music, not all, obviously, but I wonder, I'm just speaking out loud here, it makes me wonder if Sarcophago ultimately adopted English as well.
I like the theory. Sounds good.
I mean, Gojira, they're French. They clearly use English, and they're the band of the minute right now.
Right, yeah. Everybody knows who they are right now.
Today.
So, Bestial Devastation was released in December 1985 along with Overdose's Seculo XX EP. It sold 8,000 copies in a few months. Sepultura's unexpected success was partly due to their first Rock in Rio festival in January 1985, which featured bands like Whitesnake, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Queen, Ozzy Osbourne, and Scorpions.
Wow.
And boosted Brazil's hard rock and heavy metal scene. The EP was reissued by Roadrunner Records in 1997, along with Morbid Visions, including a demo of Necromancer, the band's first studio recording, and a live version of Antichrist from the Chaos AD tour, rewritten as Anti-Cop. Just a little note, I didn't spend a lot of time on when I said Max Antichrist and Igor Skull Crusher.
Yeah.
But back then they were just, like I said, and they were lathered in corpse paint. I don't know how long that lasted, but that was their start. They had to have the nicknames, the black metal nicknames stolen straight from Venom.
Yeah.
They had to throw the corpse paint on. They were like, this is us, right? You know?
Yeah.
And if you listen to some of this old stuff, it's a little rough, but it fits right in there with that vein of death, black thrash,
that early
metal.
crusty stuff.
Just that crusty shit that's hard to almost listen to, but it just has that real cool, dark, nostalgic feeling, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So the band recorded their first full-length album, Morbid Visions, in August 1986. It featured their first hit, Troops of Doom, and was released on November 10th, 1986 by Cockle Records. While later albums had more political themes, Morbid Visions and the 1985 EP Bestial Devastation were notable for their darker and almost satanic imagery. The lyrics were inspired by early extreme bands like Venom and Celtic Frost, kind of what I just said. The album's production quality was poor, and the linear notes on the Roadrunner reissued, Max admitted they didn't tune their guitars during the recording. I also put a note in here that says maybe because they didn't know how, because earlier they were having their friends tune their guitars at shows because they didn't even know how to tune their guitars.
Yeah.
Even on 4 strings, couldn't tune those 4 that he had.
Right.
They were learning English at the time, so they translated the lyrics using a dictionary. All pre-1992 releases of Morbid Visions include a O Fortuna from Karl Orff's Carmania Burana. I don't know. Some of these pronunciations, you guys are just going to have to deal with it. As an intro, but was left off the CD re-release due to copyright issues. This album marked the last appearance of original lead guitarist Jairo Guedz, and Max and Igor also re-recorded this album with the Cavalera Conspiracy in 2023. The band started growing and knowing that they wanted to pursue music. Max and Igor decided it was time to move to the larger city of Sao Paulo. So, in early 1987, Jairo Guedz left Sepultura and was replaced by Andreas Kisser from Sao Paulo. So, we're going to get into a little bit about who Andreas Kisser is. Andreas Kisser was born in São Bernardo de Campo, Sao Paulo, to Sloven mother and Morbiar Anna Marie Kisser, Jesus, and German father Siegfried Kisser. They have a lot of names. Holy shit. His father worked as a mechanical engineer, while his mother was a teacher and amateur artist. Kisser showed an early interest in music. At the age of 10, Kisser began listening to his parents' records, including those of the Beatles, Robert Carlos, and Tonacchio and Tonoko. His grandmother gifted him his first acoustic guitar, and he later won a second guitar in a game of bingo. During his early teens, he started playing acoustic guitar, initially learning basic chords from Brazilian popular music, and later transitioning to classical pieces. A friend introduced him to hard rock bands like Queen and Kiss, which greatly influenced him. In 1983, he attended a Kiss concert in Sao Paulo, and his father took him to see AC/DC at Rock in Rio in 1985. Eventually, Kisser acquired his first electric guitar, a Giannia Supersonic, along with an overdrive pedal, which was purchased by his mother. His early influences included Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Steve Howe, Tony Iommi, Ritchie Blackmore, Jimmy Page, and Randy Rhoads. Pretty eclectic group there.
Also, great musicians to start off learning from.
Yeah, exactly. You could tell this guy was serious about his guitar playing.
He was born to be a lead guitarist.
Right. Kisser's musical career began in 1984 when he formed a 3-piece band called Isafange with school friends, where he played guitar and sang. The bands primarily performed covers of heavy metal bands such as Sabbath, Ozzy, Iron Maiden, Venom, and Metallica. 2 years later, the band renamed itself Pestilence and recorded a demo called Slaves of Pain in 1987. Makes me wonder how many bands out there were called Pestilence throughout today, because there's a whole fucking lot of them.
Good luck finding that one.
Yeah. Songs from this demo were later used by Sepultura on their albums Schizophrenia and Beneath the Remains. However, Pestilence was short-lived and ultimately disbanded. In 1987, during a vacation trip in Belo Horizonte, Kisser met with the members of Sepultura and attended with one of their live shows. On the day of the concert, he spontaneously joined the band as roadie for vocalist guitarist Max Cavalera and jammed with the members during intermissions. After the departure of the original lead guitarist, Jairo Guedz, Kisser auditioned for the position and was accepted. That same year, he performed with the band for the first time in Colorado, Pernambuco, and contributed to the recording of the album Schizophrenia. Max Cavalera acknowledged Kisser's impact on Sepultura's evolving sound, stating he brought new ideas and influences into Sepultura. The result was Schizophrenia. On Schizophrenia and Beneath Remains, Kisser co-wrote the lyrics with Max, while the entire band collaborated on the music. Starting with Arise, Kisser began writing his own songs in addition to his guitar work. He occasionally provided backing vocals, both live and on records. Notably, he fronted the band in 1996 at the Castle Donington Monsters of Rock Festival when Cavalera was absent due to his stepson Dana's funeral. We'll get into that a little bit more, too. Kisser is also a member of the metal tribute band Hail, which features a rotating lineup of notable musicians, including Tim Ripper Owens, Paul Bostaph, David Ellefson, Mark Portnoy, Jimmy DeGrazio, Phil Demmel, and Roy Mayorga. Mayorga?
Yeah, I think he was in...
He was in Soulfly.
Maybe Hell Yeah also.
Yeah, okay.
For a time.
I think he was in Soulfly, yeah. Roy Mayorga. Well, how do you say his name?
I believe it's Mayorga.
Mayorga?
I think so. I can't see it. You're like off script from what I've got on the notion. But
okay.
Continue.
Formed in late 2008 by Ellefson and music manager Mark Abestia, Hale's original lineup included DeGrasso, Ellefson, Kisser, and Owens. The band began a series of concerts in 2009 in Chile, followed by a European tour and an exclusive concert in Lebanon in 2010. Hale embarked on a second European tour and played several U.S. shows with him in a lineup featuring Kisser, Owens, Bostaph, and James Leminzo. Kisser also has solo albums, film score credits, part of the Latin supergroup De La Terria, and appeared as a guest on countless other recordings.
Also of note, anytime Scott Ian was not available to perform with Anthrax, the immediate go-to fill-in guitarist has been Andreas Kisser. So the only Anthrax performances without Scott Ian in the band involve Andreas Kisser.
Okay. Yeah, he has an extensive amount. When I say he's got some countless or guest appearances on countless other recordings, the list is huge, man.
Nice.
I'm like, Jesus, this dude's been all over everything.
One of those consummate musicians who that's like all they do in life probably, and more power to him. Good for him.
And I want to say this right now. I think a lot of the times because of Max being the front man, the whole controversy with Max leaving and people just being on the Max bandwagon, he never got the credit this guy deserves for not only continuing the band for as many years after, but some of the songs that we talked about before the show, which we'll get into more, but he's wrote some great stuff, man. And I think he's kind of always been overshadowed by the front guy, Max.
Yep.
Even after Max left, they still don't give him a whole lot of credit, but man, he's a hell of a musician. I'll say that.
Amen that.
So the band dropped their second studio album, Schizophrenia, on October 30th, 1987. Through Cogomelo Records. This album marked a shift towards a more thrash metal vibe while still keeping some of the death metal elements from Morbid Visions. It was a big step up in production and performance, becoming a minor hit in Europe and America as a sought-after import. Despite struggling to book gigs due to their style, they managed to get their music onto U.S. radio playlists, which caught the attention of Roadrunner Records. Roadrunner signed them and released Schizophrenia internationally even before seeing the band live. Think about that, man. You started the band in 84.
Right. And what are they up
and
to? 87?
87, Roadrunner Records is taking a liking to you.
Yeah, I mean, they're not the Roadrunner that we know now, but that's still, if somebody told me like, hey, even though we haven't seen your band, we're releasing your album worldwide, I mean, mind blown. That's huge. Oh, you know, and what are they, like, still probably teenagers at this point?
Yeah,
like,
so they're like, I do have a note here, but I believe they're around 15 at this time. Maybe
a little bit older. I think we're 15. Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, I'd have to do the math again. We mentioned the birthdays earlier, but yeah, I mean, that's still super young.
Yeah,
they're
Max
teenagers.
was born in 69, so this is 87.
Yeah. So they're like, what? Sure.
15, right?
17.
17?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 18.
So Troops of Doom recorded, so all tracks were recorded in 1980, so we're back to Schizophrenia here. All the tracks were recorded in August 1987, and the 1990 reissue including a bonus track, Troops of Doom, recorded in late August 1990. The album was re-recorded by the Cavalera brothers and released on June 1st, 2024. So another Cavalera conspiracy re-recording.
Yeah.
Kisser mentioned that when he joined Sepultura in 87, he brought new influences like traditional heavy metal and more melodic style. Excuse me. It was an instant connection. In a 2018 interview, he noted the family's support was crucial for Sepultura's success, not just by his own family, but also the families of Max, Igor, and Paulo Jr.
Right.
Beneath the Remains, their third studio album, dropped in April 7th, 1989, and was their first recording and release with Roadrunner Records. The album showed an improved production and songwriting, earning acclaim as a thrash metal classic. Max Cavalera said they really found their style on this album and was inducted into the Decibel magazine's Hall of Fame in January 2013, making Sepultura the first band with one more album in the Hall of Fame. So, Beneath the Remains, I just got a few notes right here before we kind of go into the actual album. A few of my notes, man, to think back of how young these guys were, the production style, being you're going to have to play the songs all the way through.
Yep.
Their right hands were tight as shit on this.
Yeah.
Like really examining it. Like I've listened to it before, but really examining it and from a musician standpoint and a podcaster standpoint, just diving into it. Man, they had some tight right hands back then because it's just thrash-tastic.
Yeah.
It's just thrash. And you know how sometimes you don't like when people grind all the time, you know, and some of that I can deal with more than you, but I also agree to some extent. To me, thrash is a little like that too. Or like I can only thrash so much. I can only have that tuka, and after about 4 songs, I'm just kind of tuka it out because that's the beat tuka, and that kind of relates to my disdain I have for punk music, which. Sue me now, but I don't like punk. It's just too upbeat. I don't want to say I don't like all punk because Luke showed me a couple things that was really good. So when I say that, I'll just say that with a caveat of, it's not that I hate punk music. If it wasn't for punk, there wouldn't be metal. I understand that. The attitudes, there's a lot of things I respect,
the speed,
and like about punk. Some of it's really good, but a lot of it just isn't for me, right? Yeah. And sometimes thrash metal gets like that, and I noticed that during these first few Sepultura albums.
Yep. A lot of that same beat.
Yeah. So the drums are great on this. Fucking absolutely phenomenal. Big time Slayer influence. Like you can just kind of hear the Slayer just bleeding through a lot of their riffs. Very cousins to Slayer. Like we're in Brazil, Slayer, you're in California, but like we're hearing you over here, buddy. Like, and then but some great tunes on there. Inner Self, some acoustic elements right off the rip on this.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always liked about Sepultura, and I might even mention this again later, but like they've always had this great way to kind of break up some of that. How also you're a fan of like, let's not have 90 minutes of straight distortion. They've always kind of add a little acoustic element or add a little bit of this just for a little something different so it's just not thrash from front to back. And you can already see that coming through on Beneath the Remains. Mac's vocals are audible, but really scratchy, and then Primitive Future is just a banger of a song. So that was just some of my notes from that particular album after re-listening to it for this podcast. So the cover art had some controversy. They originally planned to use another Michael Whalen artwork, but Roadrunner convinced them to use Nightmare in Red, the one that you can see. You can see it on the...
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool.
The skull with roses.
Exactly. So... That's what the piece was called, Nightmare in Red. The original art was later given to Obituary for their Cause of Death album. Max Cavalera spent a week in New York in February 1988 negotiating with Roadrunner. Although they offered a 7-record deal to Sepultura, the label was unsure of the band's sale potential. The album's budget was a small amount by the label's standards, $8,000, but in the end, the cost was almost twice as much as the original budget.
Can't even buy a studio for $8,000 in your house these days.
Right, exactly. So Scott Burns, known for his work with death metal bands like Death, Obituary, and Deicide, to name a few, produced the album, intrigued by the chance to work with a Brazilian band.
Okay.
The recording took place in Rio de Janeiro at Nas Nuvan Studio, chosen because Brazilian rock band Titus recorded their classic album there. Burns had brought some drum equipment and Mesa Boogie amps to Brazil, a rare item for production standards at the time. Now everything's Mesa Boogie, but he brought some equipment so he knew what was going to sound good or
Yeah.
better than they've ever sounded.
Sure.
So this helped improve their sound quality. The band's communication with Burns was through translators, and Burns was rumored to have done it for $2,000 to use it as an opportunity to work with a Brazilian band and learn more about the culture, and
Boss.
obviously be in Rio
de Janeiro.
yeah, at the time. So,
Pretty boss move.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, come on, Scott, you're fucking stamped on so many amazing metal records. Like that dude is the pinnacle of fucking extreme metal, man. Like it started there. Like I know there's other guys that have done stuff, but man, what a fucking catalog this guy has.
He's a hero.
Yeah. So Beneath the Remains received critical acclaim and was put in the Slayer Rain and Blood category for metal classics.
Yeah.
Eduardo Rivadavia from AllMusic called it one of the most essential death thrash metal albums of all time.
Yeah.
Adam McCain from Metal Digest hailed it as a heavy metal classic. The album was an immediate success, becoming a thrash metal staple and earning praise from various music publications. Sepultura's first live shows outside Brazil included opening for Sodom in Europe and playing their first U.S. show in New York on October 31st, 1989, opening for King Diamond. What the fuck, dude? That's your first show in the U.S. New York on Halloween with fucking King Diamond? Damn, bro.
Yeah. Take me back. Where's the DeLorean? I want to go to that show.
Dang, man. That's crazy. So they filmed their first video for Inner Self, which got significant airplay on MTV's Headbangers Ball, boasting their exposure in North America. The Beneath the Remains tour extended into 1990, including shows with Napalm Death, Mordred, Obituary, and Sadist.
Yeah. So they're basically touring around with some of the heaviest bands on the planet at this time, because other than some Norwegian black metal that existed, I think they were doing like they were with the heaviest bands on the planet then.
For sure.
That's crazy, and they were so young too.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of resistance on this path for them to become who they became.
Yeah,
but with all of these things laying out for them at such an early age, it's a crazy testament to see like, oh, maybe this shit's just easy because Roadrunner record, they put out the record, Roadrunner's got interest in you. Like some of these people are fighting tooth and nail that are probably, I think, possibly better than these guys as far as musicians. And man, these guys just had a fucking clear path to stardom. I'll say that right now.
Also a testament to both their musicianship and their work ethic.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Definitely not. I mean, I think with any band over time, there's a matter of luck involved, meeting the right people, making the connections. But I think you have to follow up with all of that and be present and constantly be ready. So a testament to all of those things to Sepultura.
And be ready and willing to do that at the beck and call. You know, it's like, okay, we're ready. Let's do it.
Going to New York.
You're not holding back.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, it's a lot of no fear to it as well.
Yeah.
Like sometimes these bands would go out and they'd live out of cars and not have a lot of food to eat. But these guys sounds like they kind of already came from that after their dad passed, so they were ready for anything. Just like, let's go. Like, no fear. Let's see the world.
From not knowing how to tune your instruments to getting produced by Scott Burns within a matter of 5-year span is kind of crazy, man.
Yeah.
So in 1990, they packed up and moved to the United States, Phoenix, Arizona to be exact. They got new management and recorded their fourth album, Arise, at Morrison Studios in Tampa, Florida.
There we go.
So I'm going to give you a few of my notes on Arise right now before we dive into Arise.
And now we're getting into the meat and potatoes here.
Yeah, so now we're getting into some of the classic shit. So, Arise, Dead Embryonic Cells, the groove in that, all-time classic.
Mm-hmm.
A little Slayer borrow right there too, but it's just all within influence. Desperate Cry, the intro, the classic with the clean guitar, there's them bringing those elements back in there just to not punish you the whole time with the thrash metal.
Pretty anthemic, big chorus on that one. I love it.
The beat, there's Subtraction. There was a really cool groove on there, super sweet beat groove, and this is where they started to throw in some more groove in their music. They started to groove a little harder.
Yeah,
some of that could have been Slayer influenced as well, just because of the thrash groove.
Yep.
But it was a little less from coming from Morbid Visions, Beneath the Remains. Now we're in Arise. Now we're even being a little more, and this probably has a lot to do with Scott too, but we're being a little more audible, a little more smart about our decisions when we're creating songs instead of just, hey, we can be heavy and crazy and thrash the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So
a lot of growth and maturity too there.
Altered State, there's like, that's their first dive into almost like some jungle drums and flute going in there. So you're almost bringing some of that influenced Brazilian culture sound into your music right now in Arise, right? Yeah. But yeah, I just got to know, great breakup with the thrash with the sounds. Like, it's just a good breakup, you know? I appreciate that. And then Meaningless Movements is just a great banger of a closing track in Arise. So a little more on Arise here. In August 1990, Sepultura traveled to Florida to work on their new album. Scott Burns returned as producer and audio engineer, this time with a significant advantage. The band was recording at Scott's home studio, Morrisound, which was fully equipped for their music style. Their label, Roadrunner, provided a $40,000 budget, leading to noticeably improved production values.
Clearly.
This funding allowed drummer Igor Cavalera and Burns to dedicate an entire week to fine-tuning just the drum kit and experimenting with microphone placements. During the initial days, they also re-recorded Troops of Doom, which was later included in the reissue of Schizophrenia. Arise showed Sepultura's evolving sound, incorporating groove-laden rhythms and non-metal influences like industrial music. The album including the first use of Latin percussion on Altered State and showed their hardcore punk roots on Subtraction and Desperate Cry. So I have a little section here. There's a lot of punk thrash going on this album. Like, you can tell that's their influences. But just to break that all up, just to be mindful of that, Scott to probably push them towards bringing some of their culture into the music was a really wise decision. And I think this is what sets this album over the top as like one of the premier Sepultura records, at least in the Max Cavalera era, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Arise from your perspective, besides that you got duped out of a trade with it.
Yeah. I remember Desperate Cry and what was the other one that you mentioned? The first one. The couple of songs on that one that really just called out to me, and I loved it.
Dead Embryonic Cells?
Yeah, that's the one. It's got that slapping groove in there,
Yep.
heavy. So those are the ones that jump out to me, and again, I think the thing that jumps out to me and stays with me over time is when I listen back to Arise, you've got really cleaned up production, and also you've got a lot of the space in the songs where it's not just thrash, as you mentioned. I think that Schizophrenia and Beneath the Remains were just too much thrash for me and just nonstop, and again, lacking in production quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think they finally slowed down and took the songwriting in another direction, and that's what stands out to me, incorporating the cultural sounds from Brazil and breaking up the music with the beats, introducing some acoustic guitars and other instrumentation. So just a lot of growth, a huge step forward from Beneath the Remains, which is a great album. I remember listening to that and liking it as opposed to like Schizophrenia, which I was like, I can't dig it. It's like those early Slayer albums, when you know what they went on to become, it's hard to go back to the very beginning and have as much appreciation. Even for one of my favorite bands, Anthrax, like I go back and listen to the early stuff, and I'm just like, thanks, but no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta pick up from like Among the Living and go forward.
Right.
You know, even though I spent a lot of time listening to that early stuff too, I just had to like at some point I'm like, rather the new stuff that is more modern.
Yeah.
And I think with Arise, that was a huge step forward into like modern music of their style and genre at the time, and also them just kind of like taking over the world, so to speak. Like they were not the bands that they were looking up to; they were their own thing at this time. So that's kind of my take on Arise. Like they really became their own band with an identity, instead of like in the beginning when they were wearing the corpse paint and they're kind of like mimicking Venom and what have you. Like now they don't sound like anybody else as much. They sound like thrash metal, but they're incorporating a lot of their own elements, and their songwriting much improved. So that's how I remember Arise.
Cool.
Loved it at the time.
Yeah, it's a great album, man.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, I feel like, alluding to what you said, you could mention Slayer and Sepultura in the same sentence instead of Sepultura's like wanting to be like Slayer.
Right.
I mean, their timeline's very similar anyway. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, just Slayer, I think, took off and they had influence on a lot of people. But you could mention both bands in the same sentence, which I have many times when people would ask me in the early days what I like or what I'm listening to. You know, Slayer, Sepultura, Pantera.
Mhm.
That's like kind of all goes together, you know?
Amen.
So, upon its release, the album garnered rave reviews from prestigious heavy metal magazines such as Rock, Hard, Kerrang, and Metal Forces. Among lifetime fans, Arise is often regarded as Sepultura's crowning achievement.
Fair.
Although the music on Arise largely maintained the death thrash style of their previous album, Beneath the Remains, it was evident that Sepultura was beginning to incorporate an experimental edge into their sound. Just one day after completing the recording of Arise, Sepultura embarked on a headlining tour with extreme metal bands Obituary and Sadist. This tour marked the beginning of the longest promotional tour in Sepultura's career, spanning 2 years and covering multiple continents. In January 1991, they were invited to perform at the Brazilian music festival Rock in Rio 2, where they played before a crowd of 70,000.
Man, sounds fun. And also of note, and you've probably noticed this over the years, you see any band that we grew up on playing in Brazil, and those crowds are unlike any crowds on the planet.
Jesus, yeah.
They not only will sing back to you, but they'll sing the music back to you.
Yeah.
They'll just all in unison sing the melody of the song back to you. And I think, you know, on my bucket list, you've got like bands that you want to see. I would love to go and experience any band just about I had the opportunity to see in Brazil. I think that would be amazing. Like hop on a flight, take a week, you know, go on vacation, but, you know, have the whole point of the vacation to be like, I'm seeing said band in, you know, Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro and just experience that crowd because it's unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere. I mean, it may happen elsewhere on the planet, but when you watch live concerts, and I've got Rush in Rio on DVD.
Yeah.
And
Insane,
same thing.
Dude.
Yeah, they're jumping.
Same as like Iron Maiden. You ever seen them like in Brazil? It's the same deal where there's just people as far as you can see. Everybody's singing.
Yep.
You know, everybody's singing Bruce Dickinson.
Tokyo might be another place to go. Japan, they've got some pretty wild crowds there. They love their metal over there in Japan.
So before leaving Brazil for their mid-1991 European tour, Sepultura performed a concert in Sao Paulo, the country's largest city, on May 11th at Praça Charles Miller in front of Estúdio de Pacaembu. I guess.
Yeah.
Pacaembu?
Sure.
The local military police anticipated a crowd of 10,000, but 30,000 fans showed up, making crowd management nearly impossible. The event resulted in 6 injuries, 18 arrests, and the tragic murder of one person with an axe.
Jesus.
Just a week earlier, a young man was stabbed to death at a Ramones concert in Sao Paulo during a fight between headbangers and skinheads. These incidents led to significant backlash from the mainstream media across Brazil against rock music.
Oh, that tired old story never gets old, does it? Blame the music like as if
one dickhead, right,
with an axe or a knife,
right?
Yeah.
One fucking asshole ruins it for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the old saying, right? The old adage. So the Arise tour from 1991 to 1992 was their longest, with 220 shows in 39 countries, and the album went gold in Indonesia, the band's first music industry certification.
Mm-hmm.
By the tour's end, Arise had achieved platinum sales worldwide.
Very nice.
Sepultura toured relentlessly through 91 and 92 to support Arise. The tour kicked off in May 1991 with a 3-month stint alongside thrash metal groups Sacred Reich and Heathen, and it was critical success. For the first time, Sepultura appeared on the cover of the best-selling British heavy metal magazine Kerrang! And major pop weeklies like Melody Maker and NME published extensive feature for articles on this band. While in Spain, they recorded their Under Siege video, which included concert footage from Barcelona and interviews with all 4 band members.
Cool. After
the European leg, Sepultura embarked on the North American tour, new Titans on the Block with Napalm Death, Sick of It All, and Sacred Right. That's quite an interesting lineup, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not.
Sepultura, Napalm Death, Sick of It All, and Sacred Right. So you got some thrash, you got some punk, hardcore, like early Sick of It All.
Yep.
Some fucking grindcore, and then you got thrash metal guys. It's
power thrash with Sacred Reich, yeah.
So
I mean, that's a cool bill if you like a variety of music. I think that would be all right.
I think it's pretty sweet. So Max Cavalera later recalled that before joining this tour, Sepultura was supposed to open for the Clash of the Titans tour with Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, but they were replaced by Alice in Chains. The band wrapped up the year with a brief German tour in December alongside Motorhead and Morbid Angel.
I wonder what could have been in another universe had we not had Alice in Chains on the Clash of the Titans tour.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Alice in Chains still would have been massive. Man in the Box. Like, they were going to be undeniable, but I think they were embraced by the metal community, which made them even bigger at the time. And also helped usher in kind of the death of, like, hair metal.
Yeah.
Alongside Nirvana, I think.
Right.
Like, they were part of that movement too, like the grunge movement. I hate to associate them too much with that. I look at Alice in Chains as more of a hard rock and metal band than grunge. Yeah, not at all.
I think they just get wrapped up in there
because
like,
they're from
the
that
whole
area.
new metal thing that we talked about before too. It's like you're a band at that time. You couldn't be new metal, but they just put you in that category because it was easiest to do.
Yep.
But what I will I would like to know a little more about that. That was one thing that I did miss in this research, and I'm sorry for that. I wanted to know why that happened because I heard they were actually kicked off of the show. They were originally supposed to be on there, and I don't know why that happened, and I should have made a note for myself. But that is kind of weird because you got Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. I mean, fucking thrash all day, all night, baby. Yeah. And then you got Alice in Chains, which there's not a tuka to be found in their music. So, Sepultura would have obviously been the choice, but makes you wonder what actually happened there.
Yeah, somebody took either some executive said, no, we're bringing in Alice in Chains, or somebody in the Sepultura camp fumbled it. But
this is where we have the producer look it up for us so he can tell us. Yep.
Maybe we'll know by part 2.
Yeah. So throughout this period, Sepultura performed with several other bands, including Slayer, Testament, Motorhead, Creator, White Zombie, Typo Negative, and Fudge Tunnel. I haven't heard that band name in a while. Along with Alice in Chains, Sepultura secured slots in 2 highly coveted rock tours in 1992. One tour was the ex-Black Sabbath singer Ozzy Osbourne, who was promoting his multi-platinum solo album, No More Tears. The other tour concluded the Arise tour in December 1992 and featured industrial metal stalwarts Ministry and influential alternative metal/noise rock unit Helmet, both of whom had just released the most successful records of their careers, Psalm 69 from Ministry and Meantime from Helmet.
Banger.
During this period, Max Cavalera married the band's manager, Gloria Bonjowski.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Here it goes.
Here it goes.
Going down.
A remastered version of Arise was released in 1997 with additional notes and 4 bonus tracks. The album received widespread praise from Brazilian and international media. It was the first Sepultura album to chart on Billboard and to receive music certifications. Arise sold 1 million copies worldwide by 1993 and has been continuously praised as a landmark release. It was inducted into Decibel Magazine's Hall of Fame on January 2016, making Sepultura the first band with 3 albums in the Hall of Fame.
Crazy.
Arise remains a critical favorite with AllMusic and other publications, highlighting its significance in extreme metal. The album's first single, Dead Embryonic Cells, was successful, and the title track's video, despite being banned by MTV America, received airplay on Headbangers Ball.
And also, I just want to jump in real quick and say that Arise still holds up. I think you can still put it on. If you're a modern metal band right now, you can listen to this one, and I don't feel like it sounds dated. Maybe a little bit, maybe a smidge. Maybe I'm just living in my own little bubble or echo chamber here, but I could still put on Arise and enjoy it as if it just came out this year. I mean, I don't think it's that far of a stretch to consider it with current music. I just think it still holds up that well.
I would agree with you.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
the performance on it is great. The production is great. I mean, it's a classic.
The music is great.
Yeah,
like in large part, it has to do with the production.
Yeah.
Like if it sounds dated from a production standpoint, no matter how good that music is, it is a little bit hard, especially for like kids these days coming up. Like kids aren't gonna really go back and listen to stuff from the 70s too much.
Yeah.
Maybe if they were raised that way, whatever. But I think the biggest thing these days for youth coming up is to have that production quality. It's got to sound modern, and Arise does a great job of that. It sounds modern enough to where you can accept it. It's not hard to listen to, and the music still rocks.
Little side note here too, when they say they do these, re-released, remastered, re-released versions, a lot of these, even the Death ones that I've bought, I have all of them. I'm sure you have all of them too, with all the extra tracks. Like,
yeah.
You got to be like some kind of crazy diehard like fan to be like, yeah, I want to hear this demo shitty track that don't even have lyrics on it. Like a lot of them, these ones that are re-released, when they say they have bonus tracks, that's just, to me, I don't even listen to that shit most of the time unless it's like, oh, this is a remix or something that I've never heard before. But it's just like, I don't want to hear a demo version of this or a live version of this. A lot of the times I'm not a big live guy unless it's a whole album.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I get the point. Like, I will listen to some of the live stuff, but when a lot of these are the editions that are up right now on streaming. So when you go to stream it, it's just a remastered version. It's not the OG version. It's just a remastered one with these additional tracks. And a lot of times, like I said, I just kind of skip over them because
I think certain audiophiles like to listen to these things, and also people that are really into the minutia and trivia of a band might listen and say, "Oh, they if you listen really closely, you'll notice they changed this part from their demo to the final recording," and you'll be like, never noticed, because for me, like, I'm not really trying to listen to scratchy old demo recordings.
Right.
I mean, I get it. It could be helpful from a analyzation standpoint, looking at your own songwriting and looking at what your heroes did. But yeah, for me, at any of that demo stuff, when they're like, oh, like listen to Empty Words, the demo, like, I'll pass.
Yeah, I'm good. I got the real shit.
Yeah,
like,
I got the final product. I don't need to see it crawling out of the crib.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way, man. I don't. And being such a huge Death fan, I wouldn't even listen to those. So any other band, I probably won't listen to your fucking scratchy demos. And I love Sepultura, and my brain is just overflowing Sepultura right now. Like, so much music and so much research.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to do is hear your extra 4 fucking bonus tracks at this moment in time.
I'm curious about it too. Certain people love it, but I don't really go for it. I always look at it like, I would rather hear an unreleased track.
Yes.
I think that, like, when Megadeth put out, was it Crown of Thorns or Crown of Worms or whatever it was? I can't remember. It was from the Countdown era.
Oh yeah, it was kind of in between, maybe a soundtrack song.
And it wasn't.
Like that. Yeah.
It wasn't polished. Like, it wasn't finished off the way it needed to be in terms of like a mastering standpoint. But I remember hearing it for the first time, and I was like, this is a banger of a track. This needs to be on an album, and it's still. Although it's not, like I said, it wasn't rounded out in terms of the production quality, but it was an awesome track. And so that's the sort of thing I want. I want to hear an unreleased track.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's a little scratchy at that point, I'm good with it because it's something I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
But,
and hopefully it's just up to par in terms of quality that you want to put out. Not a demo, but like, okay, we didn't polish it off. But yeah, that's always been curious to me too. Like, here's 10 demos, and I'm like, it's just taking up space, bro. It's not even going to make it into the library.
Not even happening, man. Yep, feel the same way. All right, so moving on here. So Chaos AD is the 5th studio album by Brazilian heavy metal band Sepultura, released in September 1993 by Roadrunner Records. The album marked a shift from their death metal roots, incorporating elements of groove metal, industrial, and hardcore punk. Although it's not a death metal album, it retains thrash metal influences. KSAD is also Sepultura's only album released by Epic Records for North American distribution, and the first of 2 Sepultura albums to be certified gold there. Excuse me. So before we get into the making of this, I'll give you a few notes on my Chaos AD. I probably should have saved my notes for the end after I told you about the album, but I think it's all right.
It's your show.
Yeah, I do whatever I want. So Chaos AD. To me, my first note that comes to mind is Pantera inspired.
Okay.
So,
fair.
Because it's rhythmic as hell, it's groovy. There's barely any thrash beats on there.
Okay.
unique songs like Amen with not much guitar. That was almost more industrial, like probably influenced by that Ministry tour that we were on, right?
Sure, makes sense.
But all great songs, though.
Yep.
Obviously produced well, written well, performed well. But to me, the reason why I say Pantera inspired, because I just feel like at this time, it was Pantera's world and everybody was living in it. And, you know, they were big. They were hitting the scene. They were playing all these huge festivals and shit too. So it's like Sepultura
checks notes.
Right.
It was Pantera's world.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
So, you know, you're looking at this and you're okay, why are we getting into all the groovy shit now?
Yeah.
You know. So it just I could be fucking wrong. You guys could slaughter me in the comments.
No, I mean,
say what you will, but like to me, that's just what was happening.
And also, like, from my perspective too, it's a huge step. I don't want to say forward or upward from a rise, but just a lateral movement, even, because it doesn't sound like a rise.
Not at all.
It sounds totally different, which I think at this point, you know, if you've done like 4 thrash metal albums, it's probably time to like step in another direction and start incorporating some other things, some other influences, which obviously they did. They started to use more of their cultural sound, I think, but also the industrial stuff was in there too, which I see that you're going to mention going forward as I'm skimming ahead. But yeah, a great album, definitely one of their top albums of all time, and different.
Yeah.
And now you see them going in another direction.
Yep. And upon further listen to this album, I've heard it so many times that I didn't put a lot of notes in there because I think this is probably one of their more popular albums as well. So a lot of people have more of a grasp on this one. But if you really listen to it, so like Propaganda, probably one of the fastest songs on there, but it's not as fast as maybe something off a Rise or even Beneath the Remains.
Sure.
It's fast, but it has some groove to it. Biotech is Godzilla. That's got some thrash elements in it. Manifest and Clenched Fist are both thrashy at points in there, but it's not just the thrash fest of almost like some of the songs could have been in a Rise. So like they're dialing back the tukas a lot there. So yeah, that's my new thrash reference point, tuka. So the band considered several producers, including avant-garde jazz composer John Zorn and Al Jorgensen of industrial metal band Ministry. They ultimately chose Andy Wallace, who had mixed their previous album Arise. Seeking isolation, Wallace suggested Rockfield Studios in South Wales. This was the first time Sepultura recording as a quartet rather than a trio, with Andreas Kisser previously handling both bass and guitar duties. KSAD was the first album to feature Paulo Jr., who had been playing live with the band since 1984. Kiowas was recorded live among the ruins of medieval Chepstow Castle. It was entirely acoustic track featuring Kisser and Max Cavalera on guitars and drummer Igor Cavalera and Paulo Jr. on percussion. Initially, the band didn't think they could play it live due to its complex drumming. However, inspired by a Neurosis live video where the band played drums on stage, Sepultura decided to try it. They rehearsed it once, loved it, and had been playing it live ever since.
Yeah, I gotta say, having seen Neurosis live and having seen Sepultura perform this like live on video, I love it when a band just sets the guitars down and like the guys up front pick up the sticks, and they got a small kit up front, and everybody goes nuts on the tribal beats. I think it's something that I sorely miss right now from live concert experiences, is just taking a moment and then just diving into something percussive for like 5 to 10 minutes. I think it's crazy. I love it.
Yeah, I think
bring it back.
Too. Yeah. So during the recording session, Sepultura recorded several covers. The Hunt by New Model Army, Policia by Titus, and Human Nature by Final Conflict, and Crucificados pelo Sistema by Ratos de Parol. You guys are trying to make me pronounce some shit on this episode.
We're going to learn Portuguese by the end of this episode.
Igor, a New Model Army fan, convinced the band to include The Hunt. Paulo joked that the royalties would go towards new dentures for Justin Sullivan, New Model Army's toothless singer.
Rude. Rude.
But doom hiss. The other covers were included as B-sides on the compilation Blood Rooted. Policia is also a bonus track in the Brazilian edition of the album. The album's original title was Propaganda, after track 6, but Max Cavalera changed it to Chaos AD after the Misfits' Earth AD. Bored with playing Arise songs and worried about stagnating, Sepultura pushed their musical boundaries on Chaos AD. The first track, Refuse Resist, showcased their new direction, slower with a focus on groove over speed. The song begins with the heartbeat of Max's then unborn son, Zion, followed by Afro-Brazilian drumming reminiscent of Salvador's samba reggae group, Olodum. Max acknowledged with the introductory guitar riff could have come from a death metal band. Chaos AD was also their first album to use lower guitar tunings. Half the songs are in D standard except Kiowas, which is in drop C sharp tuning. Diversity was key to Chaos AD. Yeah. Max Cavalera described Biotech as Godzilla as pure hardcore. Nomad, with its slow riffs, were the answer to Metallica's Sad But True, according to lead guitarist Andreas Kisser. The album also featured Sepultura's first all-acoustic song, Kiowas, which Max described as a mix of Led Zeppelin, Sonic Youth, and Olodum. Dazed and Confused magazine noted that the albums move away from their thrash roots to a slower industrial grooves. Decibel and author Joel McClover also highlighted that the shift towards punk sound and groove metal. Ian Christie credited Chaos AD along with Pantera for developing the death metal-influenced groove metal that would influence many 90s artists.
Fair enough.
Refuse Resist mentions tanks on the street confronting police, bleeding the plebes, with a chorus resembling a protest slogan. The singles cover featured a South Korean student rushing at the riot police with a Molotov cocktail. Territory addressed a Palestinian-Israel conflict, and Slave New World protested censorship with lyrics co-written by Biohazard bassist Evan Seinfeld. Still talking about that Palestinian-Israel conflict, are we? Jeez.
Yeah. That
never goes away.
Yeah, we're coming up on 7 or so years of that bullshit.
Jesus, man. Massacres were a recurring theme. Amen tackled the Waco siege, Manifest including a fall radio report of the Condurio massacre, and Kiowas honored a Brazilian Indian tribe that committed collective suicide in protest against displacement. Nomad, written by Andreas, discussed people expelled from their homelands. Max Cavalera, in 2008 interview with Kerrang, described Chaos AD as touching the dark side of Sepultura. He called Refuse Resist an anti-police song and a piece of anarchy, referring to the album as riot music. Manifest was particularly close to Max, addressing a Sao Paulo prison massacre with one of his friends capturing the event in photographs used in the album artwork. On KSAD, Sepultura paid tribute to Jello Biafra. Max had asked Biafra to contribute to a song about the neo-Nazi movement. Biafra suggested Biotech as Godzilla, written during Eco 92 in Rio de Janeiro. The lyrics claimed biotechnology created AIDS and accused George Bush of testing germs on Brazilians.
A little conspiracy theory for all of you.
Definitely.
Don't hit me with your facts. I don't care, but it sounds like a conspiracy to me.
Or it could have happened. I don't know. I mean,
I don't care.
Yeah. By the time KSAD was released, Sepultura had become the biggest act on Roadrunner's roster. Recognizing the band's growing popularity, the label invested nearly $1 million in a marketing blitz, which quickly earned them silver and gold records in Belgium, France, and in the UK. The group also secured an exclusive distribution deal with Epic Records, the home of Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine. However, this deal eventually soured, as Epic paid little attention to Sepultura, opting instead to invest in Fight and Prong, bands that ultimately proved less successful than the Brazilians. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember Fight?
Not at all.
That it was actually pretty cool. I want to say that was Rob Halford in that, but it was like a lot heavier than Judas Priest.
Sure.
Like, yeah, I think that is Halford. But
now
the Fight was pretty good. Not as good as Sepultura, but
also true.
Yeah. So the year-long KSAD tour began in October 23, 1993, with British doom metal band Paradise Lost opening. The tour had a hiccup when Berlin police falsely accused the band of carrying cocaine, leading Max to rewrite Antichrist as Anti-Cop and perform it live. Sepultura joined Brazil's Hollywood Rock Festival in January 1994 and later toured North America with Fudge Tunnel, Fear Factory, and Clutch. They also supported Pantera's Far Beyond Driven tour, coinciding with the 1994 FIFA World Cup, celebrating Brazil's victory on stage. They then opened for the Ramones in South America and toured Australia and New Zealand with Sacred Reich. By November 1994, Sepultura was one of the most successful heavy metal bands. KSAD received positive reviews praised for its experimentation and the band's evolution. AllMusic gave it 4.5 stars, calling it a remarkable achievement and one of the best heavy metal albums ever. Entertainment Weekly, which, God, we need fucking quotes from Entertainment Weekly, let me tell you, noted its variety, appealing even to the non-metalheads. Of course, they're going to chime in with that.
Yeah.
In 2017, it was ranked 29th on Rolling Stone's 100 greatest metal albums of all time. I take their fucking word for shit, too, Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I'm surprised to even hear Rolling Stone mention metal whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I think Rolling Stone's the kind of magazine, like, if it's in popular culture, then they'll pick it up and touch on it. But far be it for them to discuss anything underground or counterculture.
If it would warrant any readers.
Yeah.
In 1994, Max and Igor teamed up with Alex Newport of Fudge Tunnel from Nailbomb, releasing Point Blank the same year. Nailbomb performed one live show at Dynamo Open Air in 1995, released as Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide before disbanding.
Yeah, so one of Max's early side projects, in which he'd go on to have many in his career, but I want to say with respect to KSAD, and a lot of bands have done this over time, where there's the lyrical shift, where you kind of move out of the fantasy lyrics and into the current events and things that matter to you personally, as you just spoke to, like the riots and just world news, as it were. So I think that's another thing where you see a shift in Sepultura in their career, moving in a lyrical direction of something that means more to them personally. And plus, how many times can you sing those fantasy lyrics like over and over and over again? You gotta, like, at some point you're just kind of like, yeah, I've already imagined that fantasy, and I want to speak to something that's more meaningful to me.
Right.
So without getting divisive. Which I dare say Max kind of was in some of his approach. Like, he basically has an ACAB attitude with Antichrist, Anti-Cop song. So, like, but that's entirely up to the artist. If they want to become that divisive in their lyrical message, then that's perfectly fine. A lot of people don't accept that, and they'll immediately dismiss a band. I'm indifferent, or I'll listen. I'll be objective about it, and that's fine. It doesn't affect me, really, mostly, and not in every instance.
Right,
Sometimes I might be so diametrically opposed to an individual's politics that I just can't listen to their music objectively. It happens, but yeah, there's definitely that shift in Sepultura right there. From KSAD.
That's a good point. I like that. All right, so moving on. Oh, let me talk a little bit about. So I do remember listening to Nailbomb. Another thing that was shown to me by other people. I was kind of aware of Nailbomb about the same time I became aware of Sepultura. I thought it was pretty damn sweet. I liked it at the time, but it's one of those things where I was hoping to listen to it before I did this bio, but it was one of those things that was last on the list.
Yeah.
I did listen to, and we'll get around to, I did cycle through some Soulfly, which I've never really got into. I did cycle through the Cavalera Conspiracies, and we'll talk more about that at the end. But with this being said, we're going to move on to Roots.
Bloody Roots.
So, Roots is the sixth studio album by Brazilian heavy metal band Sepultura. It dropped in Europe on February 20th, 1996, and hit the U.S. 3 weeks later on March 12th via Roadrunner Records. This was the last studio album featuring Max Cavalera, the band's founding member, vocalist, and rhythm guitarist. Building on the slower tempos and Latin-tinged rhythms from their previous album, KSAD, Roots dives even deeper into the Brazilian musical textures. The iconic Brazilian musician Carlinhos Brown played a significant role guiding and arranging the ensemble percussion sections throughout the album. Roots pays homage to Brazil's indigenous population and cultures, notably featuring a Exvante chant in the song Etsari, which also appears in Born Stubborn, serving as a thematic thread through the whole album. The track Look Away showcases guest appearances by Korn's Jonathan Davis, David Salveria, which is Korn's drummer, DJ Lethal from House of Pain / Limp Bizkit, and Faith No More's Mr. Bungle, Faith No More / Mr. Bungle's Mike Patton. The album is influenced by the nu metal movement with producer Ross Robinson, who also produced Korn's first 2 albums, contributing to the sound. Post-Sepultura, Max Cavalera continued to explore nu metal and world styles in a solo project, Soulfly. Since its release, Roots has sold over 2 million copies worldwide. So a few notes from me on Roots. I listened to this album more than any other Sepultura album ever.
Yep.
No thrash at all, really, on this CD. Not
Fair.
a ticka to be found.
Nope.
It's heavy. It's groovy. It experiments. Is it nu metal? Maybe because it's simpler and low-tuned.
Yeah.
But after listening to it recently again from an objective perspective, I don't know. I mean, it goes back to saying it was put out at that time. Yeah, it was slower and not thrash and all that, but like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You take it for what it is. I guess if you got to put a label on it, it's their closest thing to nu metal, but just to hammer it because it's nu metal, I don't know. If it is nu metal, it's one of the best nu metal albums ever put out. I'll tell you that.
It's a product of its time. It's right up there with Slayer's Diablos and Musica. You've got a huge shift in music happening in the mid-90s away from thrash metal, just as we had a huge shift away from hair metal in the early 90s. So what's happening now is thrash metal's been played out. Like, we're at the point in time where nobody wants a tuka. We only want, we're tuka out.
Yeah.
We're all tuka out.
All the tukas are gone and used.
So it's a product of its time in that respect. Everybody wants groove. You've got Pantera dominating with the groove metal. The down tuning has now come into play with Korn because they dropped their self-titled in 94. So now people are moving to 7 strings, drop A tunings. And you've also got a huge shift just personally speaking in Sepultura's camp to the cultural music sound more than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, way more than ever. To me, half of the album feels like it's immersed in the cultural sound of Brazil with the percussion and other indigenous instruments from Brazil and their, like, the tribal influence, if you will. Definitely just a product of its time. And to say that it's a nu metal album is, it's being a little generous with the terminology, but I think to say that, it's not would be disingenuous because they're massively influenced by what was happening at the time by way of Korn and that style of music. I'm trying to think of what else was nu metal at the time because we weren't quite to Mudvayne and Slipknot yet. But and Deftones isn't really like nu metal to me. They're just like an alternative metal style. But Limp Bizkit was a huge one, right? And there was also the Judgment Night soundtrack. So you've got the Bring the Noise,
Biohazard.
Yep. You've got the Anthrax doing Public Enemy. So you had a lot of this rap metal collaboration, which was influential on nu metal. So everything was like really groove beat oriented, and Sepultura really capitalized on that with Roots and everything that they were doing from the last 2 albums that was from their cultural influence as well. That had a huge impact on the way they approached this. And then just working with Ross Robinson.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be the biggest, net catch right there of the nu metal term. Oh, you got Ross Robinson? Yeah, it's a nu metal album.
Yeah.
Big fish right here. Yeah. So, it's fair, but it's different because it isn't like born of nu metal. They come from thrash and some of the old school stuff. So you still have all this musicianship happening. All this guitar work is still prevalent on the album, but they just took the percussion and the beats a whole different direction, and they really built on the direction that they were kind of going. But even just as short as removed from KSAD, it feels like a huge departure from where they came. Even from KSAD, it was like wow, this is way different than I would have expected. Like, yeah, without there being any thrash metal to counterbalance all of the groove, it almost seems like, where did this come from? But probably their best-selling effort.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, even in my own head, sometimes I forget like how much good nu metal there was. So I don't want to say it's like negative, but it's a hard, like, this is a nu metal album. Well, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot more to it than that, but
Yeah.
all of
Yeah,
the
fair.
precursors are there with Ross Robinson, low tune guitar. I mean, it's influenced by new metal for sure. But call it what you want. I don't really care. You can call it new metal, whatever. But it's just hard to say like this is a rap rock record by Sepultura. That's not really fucking because to me that's kind of two synonymous things almost. Rhythmic-y and rap rock, jump up and down. There's some pissed shit on this.
Yeah,
it's pissed, dude.
Yeah,
like,
it's super angry.
Yeah. So
I just think that a lot of bands went that way at that time. Machine Head being another one. They kind of went that way. So, it was common.
Getting back to just a few notes here on Roots, the Rata Mahata and Portuguese and Jonathan Davis is on that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dictatorship, that's a punk thrash song. So they still kind of brought some of that in there, like, hey, we're still Sepultura.
Yeah.
We still do like punk and thrash.
Yeah, but nothing about this album says Beneath the Remains to me. Nothing about it says Arise, really. Like they really shifted in this album. But it was beneficial. Everybody loved it.
So kind of how you just said, Roots is a testament to Sepultura's deepening embrace of their Brazilian heritage.
Yeah.
The album reflects the band's focus on the music, culture, and politics of their homeland.
Mm-hmm.
The concept was inspired by the film At Play in the Fields of the Lord, particularly a scene where Tom Berenger's character parachutes into a tribe. This inspired Max Cavalera to record with an indigenous Brazilian tribe. After convincing Roadrunner Records to back the project, Cavalera contacted Angela Papiani of Brazil's Núcleo de Cultura Indígena. Nearly a year later, the band Papiani producer Robinson and the manager Gloria Cavalera traveled to Mato Grosso, Brazil to visit and record with the Xavante tribe.
Mm-hmm.
In a 2016 interview with Nashville Scene, Igor Cavalera reminisced about the trip, highlighting how Xavante only wrote music they received in dreams. This approach to the music deeply resonated with the band. University of Iowa anthropology professor Laura Graham explained to Pop Matters in 2016 that the Xavante music is a medium to enter other realms, often inspired by dreams, reflecting their engagement with both the spirit world and other cultures.
I'm just going to go ahead and assume there was some ayahuasca involved.
Yeah, I was going to say. It's got to be some substances there. Maybe not, but I mean, it usually goes hand in hand.
It's pretty popular down there.
Yeah. After the trip, recording continued with Robinson at Indigo Ranch, his preferred studio. By then, the band had amassed an overwhelming amount of material, making it challenging to condense into a cohesive album. Igor noted it was difficult to prevent the album from becoming a gigantic jam, but they managed to capture the best of their recordings. Brian Welch from Korn mentioned in a 1996 interview that his modified, bigger muff guitar pedal used for Roots was a significant influence. Roots marks a pivotal shift for Sepultura, embracing the Brazilian heritage and incorporating Brazilian culture into the music. This inspiration was both from the desire to experiment with Latin and indigenous Brazilian music and the influence of Korn's debut album. Roots blends groove metal, nu metal with Brazilian musical styles, tribal music, and ambient field recordings. The band used Brazilian instruments, ensemble percussion, and creative mixing to create a unique sound. Igor Cavalera told Nashville Scene that incorporating Latin elements was a careful process to avoid cliches. The album features Brazilian culture in its music, lyrics, artwork, and videos. The cover art featuring a Cajara tribe member symbolizes their cultural homage. The album's songs often reference Brazilian culture, history, and politics. Roots Bloody Roots celebrates pride and heritage, while Rata Mahata tells stories from Brazil's favelas. Ambush is a tribute to Chico Mendes, a rainforest activist, and Dictatorship addresses the 1964 Brazilian coup. Other tracks like Endangered Species tackle environmental issues, with Cutthroat criticizes Epic Records. Roots received positive reviews from American and heavy metal critiques alike. The Los Angeles Times and Daily News praised it as an innovative mix of metal and native instruments. Martin Popoff ranked it as the 11th best metal record of all time, and Kerrang listed it among 100 records you have to hear before dying. Rolling Stone Brazil and Q Magazine also acknowledged its impact. Since Roots, other non-Western metal bands have fused metal with their native music, but few have matched Sepultura's success. Bands like Chthonic, Melikshech, Tegner Cavalry, and Alien Weaponry draw from their own cultural traditions and music. You like that band, don't you? Alien Weaponry? I swear you told me about them before.
Oh yeah, it's been some years now, even since I've heard much, and I don't know what they've done over the last several years, but I know when they first came out, it was an immediate trigger for me back to Sepultura roots because they had the Maori cultural influence in their music. So that's more Australian/New Zealand indigenous sounding. So really cool. I think it's a little bit gimmicky, no disrespect. At least it felt that way at first, but then come to find out that it is genuinely their heritage. It obviously makes it a little bit more palatable and not cultural appropriation so much. So it's fair game. I just would like to hear what they've done lately, which I don't know. It's just not coming through to me. Like at first they were, I was hearing songs on the radio / satellite, and now I'm not seeing anything cross my wire. But more power to them. I think, to me, like, they give a lot of hope for the future of metal. It was the way I looked at them at first, but then I just haven't heard anything from them, so I'm kind of curious what they've been up to. But yeah, they're cool. I dig. I think they need more musicianship up front out of the melody department. Yeah, like there's some really cool vocals and some really cool percussion. They just needed more from the guitar and bass, in my opinion.
So, Max Cavalera reflected on Roots in 2008 Kerrang! Interview, calling it a personal journey and a significant achievement. The album helped the Zavante gain visibility and increased interest in their culture and music. In 2021, French metal band Gojira released Amazonia, drawing comparisons to Roots. Frontman Joe Duplantier acknowledged the influence, calling it a tribute to Sepultura. AllMusic rated Roots 4.5 stars, praising it as a standout metal album of the 1990s. Sepultura also contributed War Guerrera to the AIDS benefit album Silencio Muerte, Red Hot in Latin, in 1996.
Translated to Silence Equals Murder.
And now we're going to talk about the departure of Max Cavalera and the joining of Derek Green. But before we get into that, we're going to wrap on part one.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll start off part two with Max's departure and the new wave of Sepultura. I think now's a good time to end.
Sure.
And then pick up where we left off in part two. And
we got to divide it between the two eras anyway.
And I would like to start the next episode with the story of how Max actually left and where Derek Green's coming from. So,
I think Roots definitely is like the end of the Max era and what would obviously go on to become like Soulfly. Like I felt like Max wanted to go a different direction with the music. You know, he's probably at a time in his life where things are very personal to him, politically speaking, culturally speaking. And Andreas Kisser, on the other hand, is maybe more a musician's musician, where those things aren't as important to him. Not to say that they're not important to him, but at least in his art, it didn't seem to be like the most important thing. And I say that in hindsight, looking at what they would go on to do, I felt like they kind of did go back to their roots, so to speak, if I were to use a play on words.
I like it.
Because they definitely went back to some thrash metal, as we'll get into in episode 2. But Roots, for me, man, I must have listened to that more than any other Sepultura album. It was so popular, you couldn't get away from it. You still hear Roots, Bloody Roots from time to time, you know, or Roots. It's Roots, Bloody Roots is the name of the track. But undeniable impact on metal at the time. So,
So with that being said, we hope you guys tune in for episode 2, because there's a lot more to the Sepultura story, and we have some opinions on some of the newer music that might surprise, and even I'm surprised about. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into who's Derek Green, and we're going to get into the final days of Sepultura, and then we're also going to loop back around and talk a little bit about Max after we get out of the Max era. So.
And real quick, before we totally close it out, I just want to say, if you stopped listening to Sepultura after Roots, I mean, shame on you, because there's a lot of good music that you've missed out on. And it started with Max and Igor, but Max wanted to move on, and Sepultura continued. And I think if you haven't listened to the Sepultura albums featuring Derek Green, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing the overall catalog of Sepultura a disservice by ignoring half of the body of work that they went on to create over the entire lifespan of Sepultura. So definitely come back to us, watch this next episode, because we're going to talk about that music, and it is great music that we think you should enjoy and take the time to listen to as well.
Yep. Great way to close it out. So with that being said, much love. Keep it metal. Peace. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. Be sure to hit that like button and give us a share.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed our podcast today, please give it a rating on your streaming service to help us gain some exposure.
And if you really enjoyed the show, please give us a follow or hit that subscribe button and come hang out with us every week. And remember, keep it metal.